Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Political Pulse. Today, we have the privilege of interviewing the Honourable Senator Michaelia Cash, discussing her work in foreign affairs and her time in Australian politics and as Australia's Attorney General. Welcome, Michaelia Cash, to Scotch's Political Pulse.
It's fabulous to join both yourself, Noah, but also Dhilan. It's great to be here with you.
You studied law in university. Where did you go from that to actually get into politics?
Well, at a very young age, I have always been interested in the decision-making process and how you actually influence policy. My dad, who's just turned 79, who's also a former Scotch College boy, George Cash, he was actually a member of the Western Australian Parliament, a long-term member. And out of the four children, I'm the eldest. I was the one who just loved politics. So quite literally, I think in 1983, a long time ago now, you weren't even born. I was roller skating around the electorate of Mount Lawley. You roller skated back then, putting things into people's letterboxes for my dad. And then at 16, I joined the Young Liberal movement. And I've been a member of the Liberal Party since I was 16. I'm 55 now. But I didn't necessarily always envisage myself in politics. I actually backpacked for 3 years when I left university the first time. And I left home at 20, went overseas, lived for 2 years between Israel, Egypt and Turkey, and 12 months in Europe, came back here, did a law degree with the University of London, and then I actually commenced as a lawyer at the law firm that was then called Freehills. But all of the time, my interest was very much in how can you make a difference in policy? And ultimately, the most effective way to make a difference in policy and to represent your state, the state of Western Australia, is to be in the federal parliament and preferably in government, where we are not at the moment. And so an opportunity arose in 2006 and I embraced that opportunity. I wasn't necessarily going to win that opportunity, but I embraced it. I did win it, and the rest is now history. But for me, it's very much, I'm a passionate Western Australian. I love this state. I wanted to be in a position where I could make a difference, and for me, federal politics was where you could make a difference.
Well, that is definitely an extensive background. You've had tons of achievements. Now, what's it like having that 3-hour time difference? Because you have to be on ACT time.
Well, and you would probably know this as well if you've got any friends in the eastern states. People often say when you're from Western Australia and you're going east, how do you do it? And you would actually know. We are the most isolated capital city in the world. So when you're a Western Australian, travel's just what you have to do. You've got to travel to get somewhere. I mean, for us, it's nothing to say I'm going to nip down to Bunbury for lunch and then drive back. In the east, they go, sorry, you drove where? For how long? And it's like, no, we just do that. So the reality of our lives as Western Australians is to participate, and in particular to participate in Parliament, you have to go east. So I often liken the life of a politician from WA, a federal politician, as someone who does FIFO. You're just constantly on a plane. You're flying in, you're flying out. The 2 and 3 hour time differences, look, it is what it is. You've got to get used to it. But you'll often be fielding a call at 3:34 in the morning. And people just don't care. In fact, they'll often start saying, I hope you're not in Perth. Or why did you call me? It's like, yes, I am in Perth. It's where I live. But look, that's part of being from Western Australia. The time difference is the time difference, and you just have to get used to it. But in particular, when you're a minister, like I was for 9 years, I was very fortunate. You're on 24/7 in any event. That is the expectation and the responsibility at that level. So at 4 a.m, bang, you've got to be turned on, which often means a lot of coffee. A lot of coffee.
Now, you've recently stepped into the role of opposition leader in the Senate.
Yeah.
What do you see as your main priorities in the position, both in terms of strategy, but also representing the opposition in general?
It's a great question. So in the first instance, the Senate in Australia in 2025 is actually where you can make a difference. Why do I say that? Because in the House of Representatives, as you know, Labor has the numbers outright. They do not need to negotiate with anybody. They can bring something in, They can say, guess what, we're putting it through here and now. Bang, the question's put, they win because they have the numbers. The Senate's actually different. Labor themselves don't have the numbers in the Senate. To actually pass a piece of legislation, they either need us as the coalition to get to the magic number of 39, or they need the Australian Greens. We need the Australian Greens plus 2 crossbenchers or Labor to be able to effectively pass something. So there's a real opportunity to negotiate in the Senate. So my role is to ensure that in relation to all of the policies that we believe can be strengthened through the Senate process, if we can make improvements, we either work directly with the government to make those improvements, or alternatively, if the government say we're not interested, I work with the Greens, which some people would say, hold on, you're from the party that's the centre-right of politics. Why would you be working with a party that's at the far left of politics? Because sometimes you work with other people. You might come to the same result for different reasons. So for me, it's all about ensuring that as an opposition, we are as effective as we can be in holding the government to account, doing what our role is, which is the Senate is the House of Review under the Australian system of politics. We are properly reviewing the legislation, considering it to the extent that we can make it better, taking that opportunity to make it better. But also, this is a key part of being a senator, holding the government to account. So asking the hard questions in question time, ensuring you do get an answer. 3 times a year, the Senate dissolves into what's called Senate estimates. So that's the process whereby I was a minister for 9 years. The minister sits at the table with the department, and the senators in opposition get to ask you questions about your policy. I'm not in government anymore, so I'm one of the senators over the other side of the table. But that's where we have a real opportunity as opposition senators to really scrutinise the government, to say, well, hey, hold on. How are you doing this? Why are you doing this? How much is that going to cost the Australian taxpayer? Have you thought about this? So for me, it's all about holding the government to account, being the House of Review that we should be, but also ensuring that scrutiny and the transparency in the government's decision-making process.
Fair enough. And it seems like just a couple of weeks ago, you had some question time with current Foreign Minister Penny Wong. Talking of which, in your view, what is the most pressing foreign policy matter that we should be addressing in Australia at the moment?
Such a good question. And in particular for young men of your age. And now, why do I say that? What's the difference between me at my age and you at your age? Because you've got the rest of your lives ahead of you. I've had an absolutely brilliant life as an Australian. I've had an incredibly fortunate life because we do live in the luckiest country in the world. And in particular, as a woman, I've had so many opportunities that women in other parts of the world would never, ever have. But in 2025, looking forward, we actually live in uncertain times. You unfortunately have wars in certain parts of the world, in particular Ukraine and Russia, Israel and Gaza. You have China very much asserting itself at this point in time. I mean, you recall some time ago, the Chinese Communist Party, they basically circumnavigated Australia.
Yep.
That was a display of we're here, we're strong, and we're just letting you know. They conducted, as you also know, live fire exercises into our domestic airlanes. That is totally, completely and utterly unacceptable. You also have, though, under this government, and this is something that Mr Albanese, the Prime Minister, has been known for since his university days. So this is not a new thing for him, but very much the turning away from our partner in security for over 80 years, the United States of America. I personally think that is incredibly dangerous because if you look at why I've been so lucky in my time, 55 years on this earth, it's because the Australia-United States alliance, that has underpinned the bedrock of our security. It's meant that we could have this fabulous life without really having to think about anything else. I think it's incredibly dangerous for Mr. Albanese, given China's assertiveness, given the repositioning globally of some countries, given the current wars that are going on, to turn away from the United States. And I think that, for me, is probably the most pressing foreign policy argument at this particular point in time, because who do people think we're going to pick up the phone to if we're ever threatened?
And you talk about that lack of alliance over the years with the US. How do you see us balancing that alliance with the US, but also looking to gain a relationship with China? Because obviously we have quite strong trade lines with China, and as you said, they've circumnavigated us. So how do we grow that relationship with them while also keeping that alliance with the US?
Brilliant question. And in particular, we're in Western Australia. What is the one thing we do well? We dig up a product that the Chinese love, which is obviously our iron ore, and we sell it to them. So we have an incredibly strong trading relationship with China. And I want that relationship not to just continue, I want to see that relationship grow. But that's a trading relationship. You should never confuse a strong trading relationship with a relationship with your partner in security. They are two fundamentally different things. They cannot be confused. So our partner, when it comes to being a secure, happy and free country, is the United States. A lot of people also don't know this. China, yes, our greatest trading partner. Tick, fabulous. We want to see that continue. However, America, or the United States, is actually the largest investor in Australia. Now, that is incredibly important as well, because if you do not have investment, you can't grow. So you are right. It's a really good question. You get to balance them both. China trading, but the United States investment from a like-minded friend, but more importantly, the bedrock of our security.
That's a really interesting perspective, and it's never really been said like that. But then I have a question approaching China's relationship with Taiwan. Now, that has been a serious conflict as of recent times, and I was wondering what we're doing in Australia to try and benefit that or try and mitigate that conflict.
Yep, so we have a policy in Australia which both the Coalition, the Liberal and the National Party, and the Labor Party have long believed in, and that's called the One China policy. So we would like to see the status quo continue. So we do not want to see Taiwan ever taken by force. That is not something we want to see China do. Taiwan, it must be remembered, is a democracy. China itself is not. They are the Chinese Communist Party. So from our perspective, we acknowledge China via our One China policy, but at the same time, we would like to see the peaceful status quo continue, and we do not want to see China go in and take Taiwan by force. And that has been the bipartisan agreement by both the Labor Party and the Liberal and National Parties, the coalition.
So that's really interesting to think about it. Obviously, that's been going on for a little while now as well. In other areas of foreign affairs, obviously Australia has been strengthening its ties in the Indo-Pacific region as well. What role does the Senate actually play in shaping and scrutinising these relationships?
It's a really good question again, and it goes to we are the House of Review. That is what we were created by our founding fathers. We review what the government has done. I think that's a really topical question as well, in particular if you turn to the Pacific, given what occurred this week. We had the falling over under Mr Albanese of the treaty with Vanuatu, and then just yesterday we had the falling over of the treaty with Papua New Guinea. Now, they are both very disappointing outcomes. I say that because in the first instance, Mr Albanese hyped up Australians to believe he'd done his homework, he'd done his due diligence, and literally going to both of those countries was merely just a formality. The treaties were going to be signed. And in both cases, he has come away empty-handed. I think more worryingly, in Papua New Guinea's case, they've been very clear now. Their Defence Minister will now travel to China to basically socialise the agreement with the Chinese Communist Party. So I think these are both foreign policy failures on behalf of Mr. Albanese. And the one thing you'll say about foreign policy is it needs to be done often very quietly, very diligently, to ensure that the outcome, which is the signing of a particular treaty, is actually achieved. Mr. Albanese hyped up both the Vanuatu and the PNG treaties and has walked away with nothing. Now, why are they important though? Well, given the conversation that we are currently having, the Indo-Pacific, and in particular the Pacific, it is incredibly competitive at the moment. Now, what does that actually mean? It means that different countries are actually vying to get a foothold into those countries. Australia has always talked of the Pacific very much in terms of the Pacific family. They are our near neighbours, they are close to us, we share similar if not the same values, we have that same love of sport. In fact, if you go up to Papua New Guinea, and I've had the opportunity to go there, and in particular to Port Moresby, what you learn very quickly is you'll have often a lot of the family actually live in North Queensland, and Dad just FIFOs in and out from Moresby into Queensland, Queensland into Moresby. I mean, that is the extent of the ties that we have with our Pacific family. We also have the Pacific Island Labour Agreement, which is called the Palm Scheme. That actually enables people from the Pacific to come here and work. That is a really, really good thing. What was so important, though, about these treaties is the security aspect, which we've just been talking about. In the treaties, and in particular in the Papua New Guinean Treaty, one of the things that we were signing was that Papua New Guinea continues to see and reaffirms that Australia is its partner of choice when it comes to security. Now, that is incredibly important given the contestability in the Pacific. What we want is that in the event that anything was to ever happen, Australia and our friends, our family in the Pacific, we work with each other, we defend each other. And when, unfortunately, these treaties did not get signed, that just gives another opening up to China to potentially test the waters even further. So it's a really good question, as I said, given where we are globally, where we are in the Indo-Pacific, and we very much need to be ensuring that we have a strong relationship with our Pacific neighbours, our Pacific family, but we need to strengthen and embed that even further, in particular when it comes to Australia being that partner of choice when it comes to security and defence.
So now that some of those treaties have fallen through, what is Australia doing to try and get them back?
It's a really good question, and it goes to what our role is, you're right, as the Senate. So we've been very clear as the opposition and myself as the opposition spokesperson on foreign affairs. We support both treaties and we want to see both treaties signed. So anything that the Albanese government would need from us to assist in doing that, we would more than happily provide. So for us, when it comes to estimates, we go into estimates in 3 weeks' time. For me, what I'll be doing is exploring why. You made all these grand announcements that this treaty was being signed in Papua New Guinea. I mean, anyone watching the TV would have thought he was at a signing ceremony. Instead, they can't get quorum because at the Papua New Guinean cabinet because they've got the 50 years of independence happening. So there's some really serious questions to ask about process. Why were you telling the Australian people that these treaties would be signed? Clearly they weren't. But not only that, what's in the treaties, I need to interrogate in detail what is actually in the treaties. But more than that, there's one thing to have a treaty. There's another thing to interrogate the treaty to say, what are actually the positive benefits to both countries? What are the outcomes? What are the KPIs? Where's the money going? Because it's a significant amount of Australian taxpayers' money. And we want to ensure that any money that we are investing in our Pacific family, we are getting for both ourselves, but also for that particular country and the people of that country, a return on that investment. So that's now the role of the Senate to pursue the transparency in relation to those agreements and interrogate what's in them, what's it doing, and what are the outcomes.
And hopefully in that in 3 weeks' time, we're able to see those treaties both discussed, but also then brought back for the Australian people and
Yep.
both the government as well.
And hopefully some. Correct.
Now, previously, you've also been the Attorney General as well for Australia. How has that role as the Attorney General both improved your knowledge, but also helped you in your further role in the government, both in the Senate and as a minister?
It's a really good question. And obviously, as someone who was a lawyer, I can assure you that on the first day of law school, I never ever thought that I would be the Attorney General of Australia. And that's always my message to, in particular, young men and women who are thinking about studying law. And in fact, even older men and women who are thinking maybe I should study law. Absolutely do it. And don't ever think you can't be the Attorney General, because I am the living proof of someone who in a million years would not have thought, A, when she started, but B, when she graduated and went to Freehills, that she would ever be the Attorney General of Australia. And yet I was. It's one of the greatest privileges you'll ever have, because you are literally the chief law officer of this nation. So I worked incredibly closely with both the Chief Justice of the Federal Court, but also the Chief Justice of the Federal Circuit and Family Court, Will Alstrigan. I took my role incredibly seriously in terms of I was the person in Australia who appointed judges within the federal system, and I think I ended up appointing almost 50 judges. But that was very much working with both the Chief of the Federal Court and the Chief of the Family and Federal Circuit Court to ensure that we put the right people in the right positions so that we can ensure that they can get the right outcomes in cases based on the evidence. But also the role of the Attorney General within the Federal Cabinet is to provide the government, so that's my own people, with legal advice. And so I take off my political hat, as difficult as some, probably think that is, but you must take off your political hat and you must look at something from a legal perspective. And that's the value that you add to the government. I'm not going to give you my political view here. You have now asked me for advice as the Attorney General of Australia. I will now give you that legal advice that you can then take on board. So for me, it was an immense privilege. In fact, when I left, I think we tipped over the 50% female representation on the Federal Circuit and Family Court, which I was very proud of. But very much being at the forefront of the provision of the legal advice to the Prime Minister of the day and sitting on the National Security Committee of the Cabinet, so working within the national security space, but then at the same time also working within the court system itself. It was a great privilege.
So obviously being Attorney General, as you said, great privilege, must have been a great experience. What are some setbacks that you found being Attorney General, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so it's a really good question in politics. I am someone who's totally outcome focused. I am driven by outcomes. I never accept no for an answer. I'm not interested, unless no's the right legal answer. That's completely different. But I'm just not someone who accepts no as an answer. I'm someone who, when she gets a problem, she already has the solution. I just now work backwards to work out how I got to the solution. I don't start here and go there. I start there and go here. I had a team surrounding me who were absolutely on the same page as me. We were just outcome focused. You get a chance to make a difference in life as a Member of Parliament, which goes back to your original question, why did I go in? So for the 9 years that I was in different portfolios, I was not going to waste a microsecond on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday or Sunday. So to answer your question, you're probably thinking, where's she going with this? The most frustrating bit is not being able to make enough decisions. It's like, if only I'd been able to do that, if only I'd been able to do that before we lost government. Bearing in mind as well that we had COVID that hit our government. So we had to go into a fundamentally different mode when COVID-19 hit, and we had to obviously close down Australia effectively. But for me, I try never to look at something as a setback. If a challenge is thrown my way, you just work out how to overcome that challenge. It's like I used to say to people, my parents would put metaphorical hurdles in front of us to teach you. You've got to get to the other side. How do you do that? Do you go over it, under it, around it? Do you just pick it up and smash it? But you just got to get to the other side. There's not a hurdle. It's just a challenge you got to overcome. And so even when I was a minister, I had, I think, probably some of the top people in Australia working with me, without a doubt. I will always value working with my team and what that enabled us to do. But setbacks, I try never to focus on them. If you focus on a setback, you're just going to actually end up not actually achieving. You just work out how to overcome that setback and keep going. Because ultimately, when you're in government, you want to do the best by the Australian people, and you cannot waste a second in doing that.
So then, on the contrary, what was your greatest achievement as Attorney General?
There was, I shouldn't say there were so many, because that sounds, like, oh wow, everything I did every day. It was from appointing a judge to the Federal Circuit and Family Court, who said to me when I first spoke to her, she had had a really, really, really difficult upbringing, beyond what the majority of Australians would ever experience. She'd studied law later in life. She didn't really think she was ever going anywhere, and yet she was utterly brilliant. She did achieve, and so when I eventually called her to say, I would like to appoint you as a judge, I just will never forget that conversation, because it was honestly incredible, but she deserved the appointment. And I think for me what it showed was it doesn't matter where you come from in life. Some people do work so much harder than others to get somewhere, and it was just so lovely to be able to actually acknowledge that she deserved the appointment, and she's just doing a sensational job. Even when I was the immigration minister, you have the opportunity to work with people, in particular the UNHCR through our migration programs, to ensure that people in need are able to come to Australia under our humanitarian visas and become Australians. And I'll never forget being at a function in around 2014, 2015, and it was a massive hall in Sydney with hundreds of people in there. And afterwards, people lined up because everybody wanted a photo. And it was about an hour that we stood there, and this family just waited the whole time. And they came up to me. It was a mum, a dad and two boys. And they had a letter, and they gave me the letter. And then I realised what it was, and it was my letter to them as the minister, saying that they were coming to Australia from the refugee camp. And they were now Australian citizens, and they just said, we never thought we'd get to say thank you. Those type of things make a difference.
And just to finish up for today, we always hear about what politicians can do to help Australians, what people in the Senate or Attorney Generals and everything.
Yep.
Because this podcast goes out to the Scotch community.
Yep.
What can people in the community do to make an impact, to help people like you in the Senate?
It's a brilliant question, especially at your age. Be active, be interested, get active in a local political branch. Now, I'd love you to say, Michaelia, I'm joining the Young Liberals, but that's okay if you don't. The thing is, be interested in what politics is all about, because ultimately we make decisions that affect you. Be part of the process, and it doesn't matter how small that part is that you play. Being active in your local community because you love it, you want to make it a better place. That is just so important. So for me, being politically aware and active, and letting us know what affects you. You face a very different road than I faced, because the challenges in 2025 are fundamentally different to the challenges of 30 years ago. So I need to know from young people in particular, what do you need from your politicians today? I know that you probably are thinking, how are you ever going to own a home? What do you need from us? What type of policies are going to empower you to be the very best person that you can be and to be the success that we want you to be? So for me, participation and just being aware. I think I hear from too many people, and this is not their fault, this is our fault as politicians, who just say they're not interested. Now, I understand that. Life is busy. You live off this, which drives me crazy, let me assure you. You don't read newspapers like I do. You do listen to podcasts, which I think is fabulous, and we've got to change the way we speak to young people, and we've got to do more than this. But just for me, being aware, just understand the decisions that the people in Parliament make, whether it's federal, state or local government, they actually affect you.
Well, this is one step, and we'll be happy to go and tell people to try and get involved in politics. And now I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. Your insight's been really helpful, more than we could have asked for, especially about foreign relations. Thank you very much.
It is my absolute pleasure, I promise you.